So seeing as MAI has come out, we are going to be doing a pro analysis on the #1 MAI right now. And honestly, although it's modern, we have a lot to learn from Chris G. Let's get into it. So two things that I want to highlight. #1 is the fact that the #1 normal that you're gonna find MAIs use a lot is that normal right there, which is going for that standing heavy punch. It has very good range, it's very good on hit, and it's a huge enabler of her good damage in this game. What I've noticed about this character is that #1, she is not going to be your traditional character. That being, if you think that, you know, just turning green is going to solve all your problems, I can tell you from experience, it is not. Fun fact, if you try to go across the screen and turn green, it actually scales your joint a lot harder than if you do a SNK confirm. If you're not familiar with SNK games, you actually normally go into like normals into special moves and more of a hit confirm style. The other thing I want to note is this here, which after the throw, he goes for fireball. So what ends up happening is that after you go for a throw here, you throw out fireball. This is to check your opponent. Now, one thing I want to note, when you do decide to go for this option here, right, the moment you throw, I get that you have to be observant of this and what's going on the screen, right? I get that, but the thing too is that you also have to be wary of the fact that they might just try to jump at you. So in those cases, you should also be prepared for your opponent to jump at you. It's a very big thing, a very common thing to happen. Now, if you as the MAI player want to check to see if your opponent is someone who will decide to jump at you, what you can do is that you can do an uncharged one. By doing an uncharged one, it gives you more than enough time to react. And when you react better, you're in a better situation. You can enter your DP and put them in the exact same situation again. The other normal that's going to be really good for counter poking and scrambling is this crouching medium punch as well. If you're able to hit confirm crouching medium punch, it also gives you quite good damage. And the other thing that I want you to note here is the fact that Chris G, notice how he's not going for crouching medium punch drive rush. He's going into EX moves. Why? Because it scales a lot better when you do. Now, one thing I'll say is that, again, this character is different. That being, even though you have thus burnt yourself out here, it's less so of an issue, #1, because of these stocks and how strong they are and how much damage they pull out, but #2, because of how much pressure they apply. Because the opponent only has this much health left, we can be a little bit more aggressive with our options. And because the way her options work don't necessarily require meter that much, a lot of her confirms require the meter, not the stuff at hand. So this right here is one of the situations I'm referring to. So you throw out the fireball, the EX fireball. If you don't know, if you throw out normal EX fireball, it'll give you the bounce up irregardless and count as a enhanced fireball like other EXs. It'll automatically give you the bounce versus the normal version, where if you do the normal one, it counts as a physical, meaning opponents can smack it away if they wanted to. Make sure to keep that in mind. So after the EX fireball, they're also able to go for pressure immediately afterwards, which is kind of scary, especially because you only have that much health left. Off of this instance, it was an immediate guess the moment the fireball fell on her. It was an immediate guess that it had to figure out whether either A, he was going to go for throw. Is he going to go for throw now after he falls down with the normal? It's a complete guess. So another thing that you can do here, if you notice, the moment he goes for an EX fireball, he approaches, His goal was to try and throw him before the fireball comes, because there's a gap there and they can technically press in that gap. So that is something you have to keep in mind, that if they have forward advancing moves of any sort, they might be inclined to press it in between the gap and try to drive rush afterwards. But because he was trying to parry, he saw the gap in between when the fireball goes up and comes back down. He tried to catch it on the timing that was coming up while he was trying to parry so that he can go for a throw. That's why EX Fireball is really strong, a really strong option. Now, if you're able to do this, this is more of a modern thing, but if you're able to pull this off, I would highly suggest it, because when you have the enhanced stocks, they are very, very powerful tools. The pressure is amazing. The damage, if you get a hit, is amazing. So having it on hand is one of your best tools. Ideally, kind of like Rashid, you're going to be very rarely using this option. This is a situation that will happen quite often. So you'll go for your knockdown situation, and instead of going for your typical button or try to drive rush plus button, you go for fireball to initiate that kind of guessing war. Your opponent can decide to just DP you. Now, this can generally be in your favor just because they have to use 2 drive gauge in order to pull this off. Meanwhile, you're not using any of it, right? But the thing at hand is that you got to manage your other resource, which is your health. Are you okay with taking a DP? Are you okay with taking the subsequent pressure that comes after the DP? Those are things you have to keep in mind when you're going for this type of offense, because if your opponent rips DP every time, then you kind of have to be a little bit more mindful of where that's at. On the other hand of that, if your opponent has such little drive gauge, say you only had 2 bars to work with, then if they go for an EXDP, now they only have a half to work with. Meanwhile, you're still in, you know, medium to okay condition, but you know, it's generally a lot scarier for your opponent in this case. If you're not aware, okay, MAI actually also has access to throw loops. Okay, how do we accomplish this throw loop? Throw loops for MAI is very simple. It's similar to juries, where you go for this, you dash forward, and then you go for either a button or a throw. In this case, we're talking about throw loops, so you just dash and go throw. It'll naturally go into itself. It's not too difficult. If you have trouble doing throw loops, I suggest practicing it before trying to go online with it. Again, we're looking at that normal, right? This normal right here is a really good normal. Why? Because it's a 6 frame and it goes fairly far, so it is a fairly good button to press, just because for a button of its startup, it is fairly useful. On top of which, it is, aside from your 5 frame stand jab and your 4 frame crouch jab and stand like kick, this is probably your best next go-to option that goes this far. So keep that in mind while you're playing the game. It's a really good button to press in the neutral or for counter poking situations. Now, one of the flaws is that this, unfortunately, is very hard to contest as MAI, just because her stand jab doesn't go as far as it needs to in order to punish this. So in this case, she kind of has to hold those type of situations. Meanwhile, characters with strong stand light kicks that are 5 frames can punish it. Characters like Luke, characters like Ken, and Manon. Another little modern trick for you. Okay, now she has it equipped, right? Now he's just using it for pressure. Now, one thing I want to note here is that it's very important that you kind of have this in mind. A lot of folks, when they have the stocks, what they're going to end up doing is that they're going to kind of hold on to it because they know they can destroy health bars with this thing. So they'll end up holding on to it a lot longer than they need to. And one thing that we noticed from Chris G is that he's ready and willing to let these things fly. Right, he's willing to let go of it. Now, that was a modern thing, like, or we're not gonna expect that out of anybody, right? But like, that was a modern thing for the most part. So this instance was a failed hit confirm. So while her damage is very high, if you're able to do this, the other end of this is that if you're unsuccessful like this, then you will get punished. And honestly, that combo was a little bit lighter just because unfamiliarity. But as this character becomes more known and more played against, it's going to be a lot scarier. So like I mentioned before, there is a gap in between, right? So this is the H version of the fireball. How do I know this? It pops up really high. Okay, so if you didn't know, the different strengths not only refer to its startup, but as to its height. So if we're dealing with the M fireball, it goes about here, give or take, and then the L fireball goes about here, where the L fireball will nearly just pop up and drop down, almost like a combo. It will combo on hit, as versions of medium and heavy will not combo immediately. So the M version generally is the one you're going to be using a lot because it has a decent height to it and it keeps you relatively safe. Now with the one that goes really high, it is the fastest version, 14 frames. It is the fastest version of it, but the thing is that it pops up really high. Now if you're able to contest this space here, if you're able to contest this space, so that if your opponent decides to blue it up and drive rush at you, then you'll be fine. But in this case, he wasn't prepared for this option, so he's just gonna run at you. That's why controlling this mid-range, this space, is very important, because otherwise your opponent's simply just going to run at you and it's a wash from there. So keep in mind when you're using the H fireball that it can drop from a really high height and they can mash a button in between. One thing that I've noticed as well is that using this is a very strong option, and that being going for your standing heavy punch into fireball, just because you can check your opponent, especially if you decide to charge it, you can check your opponent, put them into a mix-up, whatever you want to do in that instance, you kind of have freedom to do so. So what you'll do is that you'll press your standing heavy punch, you'll go into them, right? Then you'll press your fireball, whatever version you want. We've already went over the different versions and what they do. Now if you decide to if you go for standing heavy punch into the fireball immediately afterwards, then they won't have time to take an action. It'll be considered a true block string. Now if you decide to go for a delay and they try to mash, if you go for a slight delay, which will still be considered uncharged, then you can counter hit them, right? But some of them will decide not to mash, so then you can fully charge it and then get the mix up afterwards. And that's kind of how you want to play it, where you're mixing it up between using your standing heavy punch and EX, right? And if you go for the EX fireball, you automatically get the bounce up either way, so you can kind of take advantage of it that way. So for this ender here, you get one of two choices here, where you can either go for your charged fireball or you can go for a dash. If you go for a dash, you're still +9 and in their face, so then you can generally press any button that you want to press. And fun fact, your standing heavy punch is 9 frames, meaning that you can press it immediately afterwards, right? You don't have to play that mind game, will I press something real or not, right? So those are generally the options you have off of that specific thing. Yeah, I've seen people go for a back heavy kick, but it's okay, it's not the greatest. But the thing that will net you the most reward is by far using the fireball. This is where we're showing the throw loop, right? Controlling space. Now this is interesting. Okay, now obviously he was trying to use his the target combo here, which is just to stand light kick, right? But the thing about the stand light kick is that maybe half the cast can't punish this. So being able to use it and knowledge checking your opponent, whether they know how to handle it or not, will be a little bit important. So you'll go for the leg kick, push you away, right? Your opponent will think, all right, let me take my turn. When they try to do so, we can check them. Now anything will kill. Because he has so much health is not necessarily the biggest worry right now. And he kind of threw, but it's okay. Okay, notice how he's just straight up abusing. This is a character that's going to use a lot of EXs, you'll find, right? Just using the fact that EX puts them in immediate guess every time, right? If you try and parry it, you're in a situation. If you try to block it out, you're in a guessing situation. On top of which, her normals are fairly good and they space you out quite well from your opponent, so you kind of do have to guess on throw. Now it's party time because he got it. So let's talk about that level 2, and it's not just because it's a grounded fireball. This is actually not only fully immune during the startup, but it also is projectile immune. So even though this was technically a fireball that flows on the ground, if any character uses a fireball like this, like Cammy's level 3, it'll go straight on through it. Now here he didn't get as much damage as he normally would because he used a modern input. Not much he could have done in that specific instance. But let's watch this last round and then we'll probably call it there. So just look at this sequence here, right? He baited the throw immediately into EX. No drive rush combos. Immediately into EX. It's not a character that you drive rush with. Like obviously you'll do drive rush cancels to get offense and everything like that, but generally when you're hitting your combos, you want to do little to no drive rush because it adds so much extra scaling to your stuff. So this is gonna be a little bit anti-MAI, but let me tell you something about this, right? So they go standing heavy punch into this light, the light version of this move. I don't know the names yet. The thing about this is that while you would normally think this is plus, this is actually not plus, it's 0, meaning that if you were to go for a decision like simply going for a crouch jab, it will actually trade with their normal and cause them to at least rethink their plan a little bit. Right, activating the fireball. Immediately, the moment we get drive gauge, we're immediately using EX. And see how we use drive rush, but the only reason why we're using drive rush is to get pressure. It's not for combo extension. Now, if you happen to get the hit, obviously we go for it. But the thing is that we're not, if we can help it, we're not going for it. The other thing I want to note, okay? I'm going to see if I can slow this down a little bit. Okay? Her grab range is actually insane. Okay, her grab range is insane. She will grab you from very far ranges. She actually has a thing that not a lot of characters have, where she can go like crouch jab without going into a walk forward throw. Let's talk about this instance, right? We have the fireball enhance, right? Off of this instance, he blocks the first part, right? Then he does crouch jab. After the crouch jab, it goes into the overhead that's coming in, right? Obviously, the fireball that's over Jury's head. After this instance, you're immediately put into a situation: will he throw me, will he not? The entire time, will he throw me, will he not? And this is a mix of you have to deal with the entire time. Now, he did tech and he did mess up the pressure because he did mean to bait him, but either way, taking advantage of the modern abilities. Hey, going for pressure, survive the overhead. Unfortunate. Now, with that said, I'm going to end the video here. I hope this helps you on your MAI journey, your journey to being the best MAI you can be. And with that said, any questions?